Bass lines, for many of us, are one of our favorite parts of music. A bass line is a slow-moving melody on the bottom a lot of the time. Sometimes it's simply the roots of the chords, it's not doing very much. In very elaborate music, it can take on a character of being almost the most important thing about what's going on. So we're going to examine bass lines and see generally what they do. I'm going to start from the most simple, basic, and then go into different things that you can do with a bass line. So remember, we've got the melody on top, very often sung, supported by those little blocks of sound, and now what have become sometimes big blocks of sound, chords, and now we're going to look at the bass line on the bottom. And the bass is spelled B-A-S-S. I've told you this before, I'm going to say it again, but it also is the B-A-S-E of the music. It holds the thing up. It's like a pedestal. It's the foundation that the stuff sits on. So the most fundamental thing you can do in the bass is simply play the roots of the chords. If I play the progression 1, 5, 1, and I play just the roots of the chord, that's my bass line. So here's 1, 5, 1. It's about as simple as you can play, right? And it works. Now notice if I add just a little bit of rhythm to it, it already sounds a little more interesting. So the rhythmic aspect of what's going on in the bass is also very important. Once again, rhythm governing everything we do with the pitches. One of the other really basic concepts in bass line is the root and the fifth of the chord. In its most basic version, it has sort of an oompa feel. It's the root of the chord and the fifth of the chord. Now we can take that and use that, and I'm going to play something simple like I just did, using just the 1 chord going to the 5 chord, but I'm going to play the root and the fifth of each chord. Let's do it again. Here's bum, here's the 5 root, change to the G chord, and then it's fifth root of that chord. So the fifth of the chord going back up to the root of the chord, the root of the chord, the fifth of the chord. We do that all the time. We can also make it a little more interesting by having the root not always go back to where it started, but go up or down an octave. Notice that the bass line already has a little tiny bit of a melodic content. Now again, I'm just playing a 1 chord going to a 5 chord. I'm in the key of C. I'm going from a C chord to a G chord. So what I played is this. Here's the root of the chord, here's the fifth of the chord going up an octave to the root, and then here's the fifth of the chord, which then magically becomes the root of the next chord. I play the fifth of that chord and go down an octave, and then I play that again, which magically becomes the root of the next chord. So a lot of times, the root of the chord becomes the fifth of the chord, and the fifth of the chord becomes the root of the next chord. So you can interweave your chords using something really simple like this. There's a kind of bass line called an ostinato, which is something like a pedal point, where the note stays the same in the bass and things move above it. But it's usually 1 or 2 notes that are in rhythm, very often just the root and the fifth, that happen over and over again. This happens a lot in Latin music, and it goes something like this. And it's that simple. It's just the root, the fifth, and the root, and back to the fifth. And notice that it's very syncopated. Ba do ba 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 do da ba da ba boo ba 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 do da. A lot of the stuff is off the beat. Da do da 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 ba do da. A lot of the notes are off the beat. The idea of syncopation coming in. So let's take the idea of playing just the root of the chord in the bass and going through one of the world's favorite progressions, 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. Still in the key of C. It's a C, going to an A minor, going to a D minor, going to a G, going to a C. I'm just going to play the roots in the bass. C for the C chord, A for the A minor, D for the D chord, and G for the G chord. No tricks. Notice I went up to 6. I can also go down to 6. So instead of going up and then down and then up and then down, I can flip it. I can start on Do, on number 1, I go down, then I go up, and then I go down. One of the cool things about a lot of bass lines is the logic. When you hear 1, 6, 2, 5. There's a real logic to that. There's something about that set of notes that makes sense. What happens with most of us, though, is we play this, and it's like, well, isn't there something else I can do? Well, there are a million things you can do, and one is simply add notes between the chords, usually notes from the scale, to get you to the next chord. Playing as I start on the C and I pass through a B on the way to the A, I pass through a C on the way to the D minor, and I pass through an F on the way to the G chord, and then I can pass through a D going back to the C chord. I can also pass through a B going back to the C chord. Here comes the G. And of course, there are more elaborate things you can do, but one of the first things we do with a bass line is we outline the chords just playing the roots, and then we add notes in between those roots to carry us to the next note, making it a little more interesting and a lot more fun. Something else we do in the bass a lot is establish a pattern and then pick it up and move it to other chords. You might have something like this. Exact same thing on each chord, and I'm playing the 1, and I'm playing 6, 5, 1 with that chord. Bum, 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 bum. Then I'm going to the 4 chord, the F chord, and doing the exact same thing. Against that chord, I'm playing it's 1, 6, 5, 1, 6, 5, 1, 6, 5. Then I go back to the first chord and do the exact same thing. This is a pattern. To 5 and do the same thing. And you can do this with any chords. You set up a pattern, and the pattern can be anything. It can be something as simple as outlining the chords. You feel that's got that sort of old rock and roll sound. And I'm just outlining the chords. I'm just playing C, E, G, C, E, G, and then I go to the F and do the same thing. F, A, C, F. The exact same thing. You recognize that. You'd be surprised how simple bass lines can be in a lot of songs, and yet how effective that simplicity can be. So a pattern is another thing that we can do in a bass line. Establish the pattern and just pick it up and move it from one chord to another chord to another chord. Something else that's a lot of fun with a bass line is to do what we call walk the line, have a walking bass line. That's where we move usually right on the beat, one note per beat in the bass, moving from chord to chord, sort of sewing them together. For instance, if I want to go from a C chord to an F chord, I can just walk up. I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 like that. And notice I'm playing 2 C's. I'm playing C, C, D, E, F. It would be, to my ear, more interesting if I went a little bit out of the key and just walked straight up the scale and stuck in a little note that's outside of the key. To me, that's more interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I could also walk down to the F. I could do this. Notice I'm skipping down and then falling down into the F from a half step above, which works. Even though it's out of the key, it still works. Notes in the bass, we can do a lot of things with them in terms of being a little bit out of the key sometimes. We've got to get to the note in the key quickly, but we can use notes that are a little bit outside the key, what we call chromatic notes, moving by a half step into the chord we're going to. So let's take a look at 16251 and put it with a walking bass. I'm going to play this very slowly. So notice I used a combination of notes in the scale and notes out of the scale. So I walked up, C, E, G, here's G sharp, on my way to the A, walk down, get to the D, walk up, E, F, F sharp, G, A sharp, B, back up to the C. So I'm using a couple of notes that are out of the key a little bit, but they work really well because they're down low and they help us to sew one chord into another, walking bass line. Walking bass line is used a lot in jazz. You hear things like it's a lot of fun just walking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 from one chord to the next. So there we have the walking bass line. It's a lot of fun. The bass line usually is on the downbeat. We usually feel that it's on the beats of the chords, not on the upbeats, not on the ands, but on the, not just the downbeat of the measure, I should say, but on the beats themselves. If you take something simple like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's where it usually is. You're usually going to hear it on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Let's go there. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now what I'm playing now is C minor, just a triad. I'm playing it in this position, E, G, C, E flat. And in the bass, I'm just playing quarter notes down here. I'm playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I'm passing through this B flat, which is in my key. Remember, the key of C minor has an A flat and a B flat in it most of the time. So I'm passing through this on my way down to this chord we call flat 6. So the progression is 1, going down to flat 6, and the bass carries us there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. The bass can also be in something other than quarter notes. You can have it in eighths notes, boom, 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 like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And you can make it more elaborate. Something else that's very popular to do in the bass, especially in the dance world, is to have the bass beat off the beat. Not on the beats, but in between the beats. Put it on the ands. So it's one and. So it's completely, it stays off the beat all the time. It's a form of syncopation. Listen to how that feels. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and it's off the beat, syncopated on the ands instead of on the beats themselves. So those are some ideas about bass lines. There's a lot you can do with a bass line. It is indeed like having a melody down on the bottom. It can be very, very simple and very effective. It can be very complex and very effective. You want to make sure the bass line in any song you write, any track you record, fits what's going on, fits the genre, fits the mood, does exactly what you need it to do. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes you need more to make it happen. Bass lines are a lot of fun. Enjoy them.